All right. So you should be co-host now as well. So I think there's a few people watching in Facebook too. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hypnotherapy Uncensored Spotlight, guest hosted by Jess Marion this time. And I'm your host, Krista Marie Bowman. We are streaming live in the Facebook group. If you're in the Facebook group, go ahead and just look one post above where you're at and you'll see the link and you can just come join us. Just come join us because this is where the party is, okay? You don't want to be that little wallflower hanging out in the corner of the party. Come dance with us. And we're also going to be posting this into the Hypnotherapy Uncensored YouTube channel, which I've gotten almost all of our last 3 years worth of these events posted up there. So go check them out. There's all kinds of like fantastic content. And I'll post the links for these things in the chat bar here in a minute, so you can check those out. Also, if you're joining us as a friend of Jess's, and I hope you are, and you're not yet in the Hypnotherapy Uncensored Facebook group, I will post a link to that. There's going to be lots of links going on, so that you can go ahead and join us and just get updates, because we do 2 of these live events every single month. And we just take a deep dive into whatever it is that particular hypno professional is interested in, which today is super juicy stuff. You don't want to miss it. So I also encourage anybody who's joining us to pop your questions into the chat box or raise your little hand icon thingy. I don't know how many people are going to end up joining us, hopefully a lot, but it's easier that way because it'll bring you up to the top corner of my screen and I can see that you want to ask a question, or you can just post it in the chat box and I can read it off to Jess so she doesn't have to monitor that and she can just focus on what she's sharing with us. And she has a pretty fascinating subject today. Something to do, and I don't know exactly what she's going to say at all yet, but something to do with the intersection between plant medicine and change work. Right? Yeah. So yeah, pretty juicy stuff. But before we jump right in, I would like to know, and I can't see everybody because I have my non-video participants. Okay. I would just like to know who here is familiar with plant medicine? 1, me, 2. There's people in Facebook, but I can't tell what's happening with them. Oh, 3. Okay, perfect. And who here would like to know more about it? Okay. Perfect. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background and then I'm going to hand it right over to you, Jess. So Jess believes that every person has the potential and the ability to live a happy and fulfilling life that is deeply connected to others, to self, and to spirit. She's passionate about helping others step into the next version of themselves. She is a medicine worker, an NLP trainer, a master coach, an author, a Reiki practitioner, and initiated Mesa carrier in the 7 raised lineage of Chinchero, Peru. I'm almost certain I butchered that.
No, you got it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hand it over to you now before I do any real damage. So with that, take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this today. This is actually really fantastic timing because I've just come out of co-facilitating an 8-day retreat that ended on Saturday. So I'm like, pumping on all gears here to talk about this stuff. This is slightly different than like presenting about hypnosis because I'm not going to be talking so much about a technique, but more of an introduction to these chemical allies we have for transformation. That includes both plant medicine, but also modern alchemical medicines that don't directly come from plants.
Chemical allies.
Yes.
What a fantastic phrase. Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to mute myself now. So
I love it. So let's explore a little bit about why that and how that compares with hypnosis and coaching. Typically, when I do these types of talks, though, it's very interactive. So I welcome and absolutely love questions, and I will do the best of my ability to answer them. So as you mentioned, yes, I'm a medicine worker. I run retreats with my co-facilitator, Carlos Casados, who's also a master hypnotist and trainer and all around excellent, wonderful human being who is actually far more experienced in the medicine space than I am. He's been facilitating for 30 years, me much shorter, but I'm learning. So why medicine work? Why not just like stick with hypnosis? You know, my background is hypnosis. I'd been interested in hypnosis since I was a little kid. You know, I did my training back in 2009, 2010, and within 2 weeks of becoming a certified hypnotherapist, went out and opened my practice. So I was totally committed, passionate about it, and I still am as a change technology. I found, though, over the years that there are certain avenues, certain areas of transformation that hypnosis and NLP were just not doing it for me. They weren't doing it for me, and they weren't doing it for my clients. I wanted something more. At that same point in time, a very good friend of mine and mentor, John Overdurf, suggested I read a book, How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. And it looked at the history and science of these psychedelics. And I grew up in the DARE generation of the 90s, where like drugs are bad, okay? Like everything is bad. A cigarette is the equivalent of heroin, and you know, a drop of LSD, forget it, you're a meth addict. That was the drug education that I grew up with, which is really a shame. And while motivated by a desire for good in, you know, our communities, also got a lot of stuff wrong, especially when it comes to psychoactive plants and psychedelics in general. When I read that book and started looking more deeply into it, this was like 2019, I felt a calling, like, this sounds like what I've personally been looking for a very long time. I began meditating when I was 12 years old. I practiced for a period of time Chan Buddhism, which is Chinese Zen, and then tantric practices, then on to yoga. I kind of like went through all of the different non-chemical psychoactive traditions I could find. And all of them added something to my quality of life, added something to my experience. However, it wasn't complete. Something was still missing. I wasn't getting to the point where I felt I, you know, should be and needed to be, even with a daily meditation practice. You know, I started at 12 and I got interested in psychedelics when I was 36. So that's like a big window of time to be practicing to not get where I want it to be. And I know there are some yogis listening and some Zen practitioners who are like, that's not the point. I know, but still, this was my journey. Then when I took my first mushroom journey, it felt like returning home. It felt more real and more familiar than everyday reality. And it really transformed something deep inside of me. And it was that thing that I had been searching for so long was available inside of 4 grams of a dried fungus, which is kind of a karmic joke for me, because I hate mushrooms. Like, I really cannot stand culinary mushrooms at all. And yet here's this thing that opened me up in ways that no other practice, no other discipline, no other mind technology had. And it really started a long-term passion for understanding these psychoactive substances, how they can be used for transformation and growth and healing and mystical experiences, as well as the different varieties of psychoactive chemical allies, whether naturally occurring or created by humans, that could be of benefit to the individual and their growth and healing, and also of benefit to the larger society. So that's kind of my entry point into this. And as I started researching more on the neuroscience side, because those of you who've known me for a long time, who actually have seen me now kind of go down this very energetic spiritual path, are like, well, what happened to neuroscience, Jess? This is what happened. The research around psychedelics is light years ahead in many ways of the research that we have around hypnosis. However, there are some key correlates. For example, in the hypnotic state for people who are classified as being highly hypnotizable according to the Stanford scales. These individuals show in a trance state downregulation of the default mode network. Your default mode network is the system in your brain that keeps your idea of who you are intact. It's your memories, it's your filters, it's your meta programs, it's your critical faculty. And in that small 20%, according to the Stanford labs, that becomes downregulated. At the same time as this study was being done in University of California, or Stanford, excuse me, at Stanford, across the pond in the UK at Imperial College, they were looking at what happens to the brain in the psychedelic space. They found an even more dramatic downregulation of the default mode network, nearly switching off entirely at the right dose of a psychedelic. And when that happens, they took it a step further. The brain enters something called neural entropy. And neural entropy means that the guardrails that hold neural networks in place now are super flexible and have pretty much disappeared. So you get these different parts of the brain that are able to light up in novel ways, in ways that they never were able to before, which holds a tremendous amount of promise and potential for healing. If we think about like Hebb's law, for example, neurons that fire together, wire together, or more accurately, neurons that fire together become more sensitive to each other and then eventually over time wire together. The psychedelic space blows that wide open and makes it possible in ways that I have not encountered in the hypnotic state. I'm not saying it's not possible for me personally, both as an experiencer and a facilitator. I have not experienced that. So all of this got me super curious. And as I was stepping into the world of psychedelics and plant medicine, I'm still also coaching people every day. There's, a certain category of people that these types of medicines are just not ideal for. So the metaphor I like to use is that hypnosis is like taking a hammer and a chisel to a problem, while 4 grams of mushrooms is like taking an atomic bomb to the problem. Which tool is necessary? For like smoking cessation, I'm going to say hypnosis wins out every time. It's easier, it's quicker, it's less dramatic. However, if you have someone who is on a deeper spiritual quest, someone who is looking to continuously improve their life and explore themselves in novel ways, hypnosis is a good entry into that. But it's not the end of the story. It's a door opener. And then if you step into the world of psychedelics, now you are blasting that door wide open. Not only do you have neural entropy, but people experience these transhuman mystical encounters where the ego completely dissolves. You become one with the universe or with plants or any animals around you. Depending on the chemical ally, you can become one with the group that you're in, to the point of kind of having what's the word I'm looking for? Like psychic moments with other people. It just really depends on what you're doing. So there's a tremendous amount of potential for healing and growth. And yes, even, this is going to fly counter to what a lot of the research is about these days, but also recreation. We downplay recreation in our society because we value like hard work, long hours, all that stuff. But the act of recreation, recreation, to recreate the self, is also a sacred and important act that these chemicals can help facilitate. So are there any questions? Open this up. Yes.
I love that. Recreation, recreate. I just wanted to say on that same note that, so my introduction to psychedelics occurred when I was a teenager. I was raised in the 80s. So we were all about the drugs, baby. Like the 90s, it was dare, but like not in the 80s, right? I was anorexic at the time. And I had a boyfriend who was like, hey, let's go do some shrooms. And I was like, I've never done that before, but sure, why not? I'm an 80s kid, right? So I did, and it was supposed to be recreation, except that in that one single, I guess, episode or experience, it lasted about 6 hours. By the next day, I was no longer anorexic.
Yeah.
Like it just blew it wide open. And I'm sure that we did probably more than 4 grams. It was not a pleasant experience. I'll have you know, it was not a pleasant experience, but it had the unintended, very positive side effect of just relieving me of this disorder. I still had a little bit of the psychological part to contend with, which I did through different types of therapy. I didn't know about hypnosis back then. I was a teenager, but I just wanted to say the recreational side of it, I think, yeah, we do downplay it, but in my case, it turned out to be incredibly therapeutic, even though it was intended to be recreational.
Yeah. Yeah. Any like 4 grams and up, we would definitely say is not really a recreational dose, even if we go in doing with the intention of recreation. It tends to be more profound like that. And
we certainly weren't measuring it.
Yeah. And it's,
we were 16 and 17. So we're just like, okay, we're just going to take it and see till it's gone, anyway.
And I think you bring up a really excellent point about it not being comfortable. For me, like more often than not, it is not comfortable. However, there's a tremendous value in that because we as a culture back away from discomfort. We back away from anything that it is a bit challenging. I mean, with the exception of people who like extreme sports and that sort of thing, but as a whole, we like things to be comfortable, to be easy, to be fast. And these chemical allies are none of those things. They can be uncomfortable. They can be beautiful. They can be comfortable too, depending on the energy you bring into it. But they offer us a different type of experience in terms of therapeutic change than what you might have if you go to a therapist or a hypnotist office today, where, I experience it as a hypnotist. Client comes in. I don't want them to feel bad. I want them to have this totally blissed out experience the entire time. And I know in hypnosis that is possible. I also know that hypnosis does not have the same level of success rate as psychoactive substances do for things like anorexia and treatment-resistant depression and substance use disorders. The quality of experience that psychedelics invite for us, where there is a little bit potential discomfort, not everybody has it, it just depends on your kind of unique psychology and what you bring to it, it becomes a bit of an initiatory rite. If you look at traditional cultures around the world, every culture at some point has an initiatory rite where, for example, a child is moved from childhood into adulthood. And in a lot of the traditions, there's a lot of discomfort around that because there are lessons to be learned. So one of the big lessons that I've taken from the medicine space is life is uncomfortable and it doesn't have to be anything else. And it's okay. How do you begin to navigate the more challenging moments in life with a deeper sense of groundedness and grace?
I love that. Yeah. And it is interesting how it seems culturally speaking, if we go back to 100 years ago, there wasn't this automatic sense of entitlement to happiness. Mm-hmm. We didn't come into the world going like, well, where's my happiness? I was guaranteed joy,
Yeah.
But now there definitely, at least in the Western culture, seems to be quite a bit of that. And if we're not happy every moment, we tend to pathologize that. Like, what's wrong with me that I'm not happy all the time? Anyway, I'm so
better get on those pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you. Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of which, I'm having allergies today. I probably need a mini hypnosis session for my allergies. Anyway, so I wanted to ask you about this thing that you recently did. I think it was recently, the Mesa carrier in the Seven Rays lineage. What that
So-
that has to do with the sacred medicine stuff? Okay, can you talk about that a little? I'm really curious.
Sure. So I'm a Mesa carrier, which means I've been initiated in a traditional Incan tradition, culture and community to carry a sacred altar that is used for healing, for transformation, for, pretty much anything the community needs. So I'm still actually currently training. I'm doing a year-long program where I'm working with a Peruvian shaman, learning the more traditional skills for working with these plants. Now, I also trained with a Mazatec teacher. The Mazatec community preserved sacred mushrooms for 400 years and kept it away from Spanish colonialism and the conquistadors who would have absolutely decimated the mushrooms. And if that happened, we wouldn't have what we have today. So I've trained in that tradition. I'm training in the Peruvian tradition. All of it is to fully round out the experience in the medicine space as I facilitate for other people, because we facilitate in a traditional way, meaning that both myself and my wonderful co-facilitator, Carlos, when we facilitate, we also imbibe in whatever we're facilitating because we need to be on the same wavelengths. With that said, we have a responsibility to the group and to the energies of the group. So training with a community where this way of working with sacred medicines is how it's done has been an invaluable process for me, for my own growth and development of skills in that space. So I do put it in my bio as well, because I do take some things, some of the rituals that were, well, I can't say take, were given to me, and utilize them. So I want to be clear that this isn't a cultural appropriation thing. I've been given active permission to say the specific prayers and to do the specific practices.
Beautiful. So I had a situation once with a client who she went, I think she did it in California, but she went to have a sacred plant ritual over the course of a weekend with a husband and wife team that were facilitating. I don't know what their background is in this. She said it was definitely profound. It was life-changing and uncomfortable. She had 2 hypnotherapy sessions with me prior to doing this. And when she came back, she wanted to have her 3rd because it was already in the bank. However, upon taking her into a trance state, she panicked and said, I can't do this anymore. It feels too much like that weekend that I had, which was interesting to her because she thought that she'd had a great weekend, but now she had this new part that was sort of guarding the gate and being like, no more. We don't like this. And I was just wondering, like, how would you have maybe talked to her about that? Because I was a little bit like, well, if you're not comfortable, then let's not do this. We can do more just like NLP type things, no trance necessary, or very mild anyway. But I'm just curious, like, what might have you said?
How close to the weekend was that follow-up session with you?
It was about a month later.
Okay, so in that case, I would be interested to explore that with her. What is actually happening there. I wouldn't be surprised if it were like a few days or a week out. I know for me, because we run like 8-day retreats, so we dose at least 3 times. I know by the time I get to that 3rd journey, I'm like kind of like, okay, I guess we're going to do this again.
Right.
So a little bit of that is normal, especially if it's someone's first time and it's kind of this big thing in their life. But at a month out, I would be a little bit playful and a little bit curious. Like, okay, well, what's the significance of it feeling like the mushroom journey? And it's probably, and this is a mind read, if I had to guess, it would be something around, if there was physical or emotional discomfort, there's a little bit of concern of that happening again. And if that's the case, then I would future pace, well, you went through that experience and you had this tremendous personal transformation. I wonder what that means about what you're feeling now and what's possible beyond the session. So I would kind of hijack the positive side of the
Mhm.
mushroom or whatever the plant medicine was within the session, but I wouldn't proceed until I knew more around what is happening internally for this person, because there could
It
be
was really surprising for her as well as for me. She wasn't anticipating that anything negative, or not even negative, but just, any sort of blockage would come up, because she had no issue prior to it. And she didn't think of that experiences having been in any way negative. So whatever was happening below the level of conscious awareness for sure. Anyway, so yeah, thank you. I like that, hijacking it and sort of focusing on the positive of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would explore it more with her.
Mhm.
Because she did go on a journey. It's 6 hours. A lot happens in 6 hours.
Mhm.
So there could have been things that were less than positive in that experience that are unconsciously influencing.
Yeah.
It could also be that she just needed more time to become grounded again in the material world. Yeah, like I've had experiences where afterward I was like, you know what? I don't think I need to alter my consciousness for a while. I think I'm good. I think we need to focus on being present in the here and now. So it could be more of like a stabilizing mechanism, but without speaking to her, really no idea.
Yeah. Well, I myself had been microdosing regularly for about 5 years with psilocybin, just 0.25 milligrams. They're like tiny amount. But it's gotten to the point now where I don't have to at all. I could just sort of think about it, and then suddenly my brain just goes like, oh, we're doing that. And then it starts doing that without actually microdosing anymore. So cool. Yeah, just the thought of it somehow. It's really interesting how, it's, and when I actually do, because I did a few weeks ago, I took just a tiny amount again, just the 0.25 milligrams. And I was like, oh, that's too much. It's like, what? How did that happen? Anyway, it's just kind of interesting. So do we have any questions from anybody else? I'd love to. Yeah, Matt.
Hey, Jess.
Hey, Matt.
So I was wondering how you use it in your practice, or like, so if you said it's like it's overkill for smoking, but like, but not like say anorexia. Did I?
Right.
Okay. So if you were to use it in your practice, then the person consumes it, and then what do you guide them to think about or to do beyond that? Sure.
So just for clarification, I don't do it in my hypnosis and coaching practice. I do it as a retreat. So I keep it separate. So unless a client asks me directly about it, I typically will not broach the topic with hypnosis clients. For me, it's kind of an ethical thing. But if they open the door and want to discuss, then we sure can. In terms of the retreats, we spend a lot of time working on mindset and clarifying goals. So how it typically works in the medicine space is we'll go in with an intention. Unlike hypnosis and NLP that puts like a really strong emphasis on like your outcome has to be, positively stated, specific time and place, like the well-formed outcome stuff. We don't need that so much in the medicine space, surprisingly, but they do need some clarity as to what they want from it. Then after the intention is set and we do ritual to further solidify that intention, they take the medicine, and then it's about letting go, because the medicine works through metaphor and playfulness. So there isn't a linear path. For example, somebody who is taking it because, anorexia, because that's the example that came up. It's not that they're going to take the medicine and like think long and hard about their life and their nutrition and their body. But what they might do is take the medicine and have some sort of visual adventure through their body and through the cosmos. Or they'll have some profound mystical experience of the divine, and they come back differently. Or they might start reviewing memories and releasing trauma around those memories. With something like mushrooms in particular, the mushrooms take you where they want you to go.
Mhm.
So it's like you hoist your sail, you're going in the direction, but how you get there is going to be completely dependent on the individual. We've had people who have laughed themselves for 6 hours into massive transformation. What was happening inside? I have no idea. And they couldn't really articulate it after, but they just laughed the whole time and all of this trauma released. I've had other individuals who lay there on the floor for 6 hours, completely motionless, lost in a beautiful mushroom-induced dream, and they come back different. So we really trust the medicine. And in terms of facilitation, our job is to create a safe container so that the person feels comfortable to do their exploration and to do their own inner work. Our job isn't so much to push the experience in one direction or another.
Okay.
But to me,
So if I understand right, it's just you kind of go in with an intention and then just surrender.
yes. Yes. And surrender is like the number one skill.
Yeah.
I would encourage everyone who is interested in medicine work to develop. And for some people, it's very easy. People like me, it's a work in progress.
Mhm.
But the level to which you allow yourself to surrender to the experience, that impacts the quality of the experience. The more you surrender, the easier it is, and the more profound it is. The more one fights it, they're still going to have transformation. It just might be more uncomfortable.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great question.
Yeah.
Any other
Do
questions?
we have any other? Yeah, go ahead. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question.
Hello.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi. I was listening on the Facebook and then I popped on here. Yeah, so when I was young, I had some I did mushrooms and LSD, and I had some experiences that were pretty, I had great experiences, I had sex with a tree, I saw God, but I also like had experiences like that were like of things like I would say false memories and things like that, where I kind of felt like I had been sexually abused like as a baby and things like that. So and then since then, I've also had like anxiety throughout my life and things like that. So at times I think about about trying it again, but then I'm like, it's taken me like kind of 30 years to sort of get into a space where I'm okay with my anxiety and things like that. So yeah, what would you suggest in a case where you're like, well, maybe I should do it, but maybe I kind of have maybe I've done it and some of it was kind of scary and put me on the edge for a while,
Yeah. There are a few things. The first is taking it as a teenager is very different than taking it as an adult who's doing it more ritualistically. So set and setting plays an important role in that. Challenging experiences are, I was actually reading an article this morning about this, there is a correlation between age of dosing and challenging experiences. The older you are when you dose, the less likely to have a challenging experience because you have more life experience. And also you're bringing a different mindset into the medicine space. In terms of things like false memories coming up, memories can come up in the medicine space, whether true or false. It's really difficult to know because memories are fallible things. So the question becomes, okay, well, what's the underlying emotion here? Let's work on clearing that, whatever that emotion is, regardless of the content that was seen. If you're not feeling, if you're feeling kind of like, well, maybe I should do it, but I also feel like I'm nice and grounded now, my personal inclination would be to not do it then. because it comes down to the question of why do it? What is the underlying force that is saying, maybe I should go back to this? It needs to be for
I
you
think because I
personally.
have questions about death.
Okay. So then it becomes, is that compelling enough for you to be comfortable jumping into an experience that you know in the past for you kind of went one way or the other?
Okay.
Yeah, I can't like give you a recommendation beyond that,
Sure.
but just know yourself, have an honest exploration of your reasons for doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and do those reasons outweigh any kind of trepidation? You might want to consider then, given your past, working with an experienced facilitator in case some of that stuff comes up, because when that happens, that stuff is stuff we carry around in our heads anyway. It's there whether or not we're consciously focusing on it. Doesn't mean it's true. It's just kind of thought compulsions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there anyway. So if that stuff comes up, you want to have a roadmap to go, okay, I don't have to go down this route. This is not what I'm looking for in this experience. I had an instance about a month ago. I did a fairly high dose journey with a friend, and everything was going great. And then like midway through, I had some thought compulsions come up that are familiar to me in that space. And I could feel my anxiety rise, and I started to become very kind of destabilized. And I had to kind of look inside and go, no, I know what this is, and I'm not doing this today. Let's go do something different.
Yeah.
And that worked. Like, we don't always have to go down the dark pathways that can sometimes appear. Sometimes it's really useful and therapeutic to do that. And other times it's actually more therapeutic not to do that.
Do you ever recommend to people to do a micro dosing journey over a period of time, as opposed to doing, the higher dosage therapeutic journeys in a short period of time?
So typically, the only time I personally recommend microdosing are for people who are doing it for neurogenesis reasons. So they want to improve cognition and protect memory, that type of stuff. Then I'll recommend microdosing. Or people who have neuropathy. There's some data that suggests microdosing is effective in managing some forms of neuropathy. Generally, though, I don't recommend it. And that's simply because I've tried it off and on a number of times. And for me, I didn't see the value of it. I didn't get a big shift from it. So for me, it's a congruence thing. It's not to say that it doesn't
Gotcha.
work and that people don't. For me, it didn't. So I couldn't be congruent suggesting it.
Right. For me, I found it really helpful for seasonal affective disorder and also anxiety, because I don't know if you knew this or not. I mention it once in a while, but it's not really a part of my life anymore, so I don't really think about it. But I struggled with agoraphobia on and off for about a decade and a half. And microdosing actually helped to put me into an observational perception, so that I was able to acknowledge the anxiety that was coming up instead of being crippled by it, and then slowly get back out in the world. So, so for me, the microdosing helped immensely. And plus, because of that really effective, therapeutically effective macrodose that I did when I was a teenager, which was fantastic in its like results, but really like uncomfortable, kind of what Jenny was talking about. Like, I have been very hesitant to do that again for that reason. Not that I don't want the major transformations, but just like the method of delivery is a little intense. So anyway, go ahead.
Then you kind of have to go, well, is it worth it? Can I put up with discomfort because I know on the other side the payoff is worth it? Like, I know for me personally, I have in my values hierarchy, if something's difficult, that means even more so I need to do it. But I'm also a bit of a polarity responder. So I go in knowing, hey, this could be beautiful. This could be terrifying. I'm willing to accept both sides of the spectrum. If I'm not willing to, and there have been moments where I was not willing to accept both sides of the spectrum, in those cases, I don't dose that day. Go, nope.
I tend to approach things that I'd rather it be as gentle as possible.
Yeah.
But I think I spent the first half of my life polarities, extremes, all that stuff. And so now I'm just like, let's just do it nice and sweet and gentle,
Well, there are medicines that are sweet and gentle. The tryptamines, which LSD, DMT, psilocybin, they can be sweet and gentle, but they can also be challenging, and they last a long time. They are excellent for these beyond self mystical experiences, like questions around death, for example. But if there are things like anxiety or post-traumatic stress that people want to work through, or having more of a spiritual experience that's grounded in community in the present moment, then something like MDMA is a wonderful, wonderful ally and a beautiful substance to work with for those. You're not going to necessarily have these same kind of outer body, going to talk to DMT entities or anything like that, but you will be able to explore things that in the past would have been emotionally challenging. You speak from a very authentic, honest, open place. You feel very connected to those you're around. And it's a very pleasant, beautiful encounter.
Child of the
psychedelic.
80s.
Yeah.
Did plenty of that. Yep. That was fun stuff. I wasn't doing it therapeutically though, purely recreationally, but I would say I definitely got some therapeutic benefits out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's beautiful. Can you we have about 15 minutes left. I'd love to just hear, unless this is like broaching on things that you're not supposed to talk about, but what would a ceremony sort of look like? Are you allowed to tell us that?
Sure. So
okay.
An individual ceremony. So like within a retreat, we have at least 3 ceremonies with master teachers. And we also do smaller ceremonies with cacao and sometimes kava and things like that. For one of the big ceremonies, it typically will begin with a bit of a grounding meditation, centering, bringing the energy up internally. Then we'll do a banishing. So on one level, it's to clear any unwanted entities that can interfere with the ceremonies, which does happen. I can speak from personal experience, so it's very important. The other thing it does is it invites the people doing the banishing to step into a position of personal empowerment. So stepping into your best, most refined self. Then we'll do an invocation. We'll invite ancestors, whichever spirit allies we might be working with in that time to become present. If we're working with a group, and I do this also for my solo journeys, we'll each pull a card from the major arcana that serves as an anchor. So if somebody gets lost in the journey, they just need to look at their card and then they kind of go, oh, that's right, I'm doing a medicine journey. Also, what does this card, or how does this card relate to the journey I'm having? And what's really weird about this part is nearly every single time that card, whatever card you pull, it will directly relate to the journey you have. It's kind of bizarre. But it also provides a nice meditation post journey to look back and review on the experience. Once we do that, then we'll.
So you're pulling the card prior to the journey, or as part of the initial.
As a part of the ceremony, yeah.
So it's like a chicken and egg kind of thing, almost. Like, which did this inform the journey, or did the journey cause that? Yeah. Anyway, that's really, I like that.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about it is when we do it with people, most people that we've done it with don't have a strong familiarity with the tarot. And yet it does seem to link up, which is kind of cool. At some point in all this, we'll do a smudging with at least Palo Santo, sometimes also copal and sage, just depending on what's needed. Then we'll ingest the medicine. Then we might do a sound bath for people, or drum. If it's just me and friends doing it together, we'll usually drum for about a half hour until it starts to kick in. And then as it's kicking in, you may want to lay down or do some gentle stretching, just depending on the overall vibe. And this last retreat, on the first mushroom journey, everybody was kind of moving around and talking. On the second one, everybody was quiet and laying down and deeply in trance.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And then the ceremony will continue throughout the entire journey. We'll usually end the journey portion, maybe outside around a fire, if that's available. Sometimes people like to prolong the journeys by including some cannabis, which tends to lengthen out a mushroom or LSD journey towards the end. And then the ceremony doesn't actually close until the next day. So everybody will go to sleep. The next day, we do some gentle movement, and then we'll do a cacao ceremony. And with the cacao ceremony, then the larger medicine ceremony ends.
That sounds really beautiful. So you start it a little bit later in the day, it sounds like.
Yes. So
And then
depending,
they can just go to sleep whenever they start
Yeah.
to come down from it. Okay.
yeah, it
Nice.
depends on the medicine we're using. So mushrooms are typically later in the day, late afternoon, early evening. LSD, we might do a little bit earlier, only because it lasts a really long time.
Mhm, mhm.
MDMA will be evening time and into the night. If we work with Wachuma, which is San Pedro cactus, mescaline, is connected with the
Oh,
sun. So those ceremonies are done earlier. Those ceremonies are done like around like midday.
Interesting. Didn't know that. And are there certain areas where it is absolutely legal, all of these things, to do this? Or is it because you have the status that you have as far as that, what is it, the seven
Right. So it is in the US.
raised lineage? Go ahead.
Yeah, in the US, it really depends on where you are. Federally, it's all illegal, and it's very difficult to even claim religion status, which is the one protection. It's RFRA, the Religious Restoration Freedom Act, I think,
Okay.
which allows certain communities to legally work with psychoactive substances. But it's very difficult to get that status, and you can't just like apply for a RFRA status. What ends up happening is like the DEA gets involved, and it usually happens with ayahuasca churches because they have to import the ayahuasca. They get involved or bring the church up on charges, and then the church has to challenge through RFRA. There are certain states where it's legal. It's legal for personal use in Oregon. There is also facilitated use in Oregon, but it is heavily regulated by the state. Colorado, personal use is legal and communal use is legal, but they are carving out something similar to what Oregon does for facilitated use, and their approaches to facilitated use are not the same as ours. They're kind of based off of a medical model, which is really great for certain individuals. So people who have significant psychiatric disorders should not be coming on retreat with us. They need to be in a medical setting with properly trained professionals. This also includes people who have like significant health challenges, where a psychoactive church or retreat is just not going to be able to give the level of care and safety that individual would need. So they all fulfill a purpose, where on our side, we are integrating a lot more spirituality than one will get from a facilitation center. And it's a different quality of experience.
So a lot of it sounds like scope of practice type stuff too.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
as
Scope
far
of
as each
practice.
individual.
And then certain cities like Portland, Maine, just, I think they decriminalized, or they may have legalized. I can't remember. I read it this morning as well. Detroit, DC, Ann Arbor, Santa Cruz, Berkeley, San Francisco, all have various levels of either decrim or legalization.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's very cool. I love that you're doing this. And I'm such a fan. Like when I found out that you were doing this, and I really loved the last time that you came on, which was much more neuroscience heavy, but that's also my jam. So when you started doing this too, I was like, oh, that's so exciting. Yeah. Matt, do you have a question?
Thanks. I have a two-part question, but I don't think the parts are related, so I apologize. With the with memory, if it's true that it gets kind of rewritten every time we access it, and it in a ceremony when memories come up and a person goes through them or revisits them. Is that what you were talking about as far as like being metaphorical, or is there the model that the memory is actually true, or it's like a recording?
I would say no memory is true. None of it is an actual recording, because memory works for the best of our knowledge right now. Memory works through neural associations. So the brain actually has to put it together each time it's remembered in detail. So if there's new information, then the memory changes. In my experience, when memories come up in the psychedelic space, it tends to be on lower doses of things like mushrooms, where it's kind of like a psychotropic effect, where you're feeling it and you are in an altered or a non-ordinary state, but you're kind of like not blasted out to the cosmos. Then we might start reviewing memories, but there's no way to know whether or not they really happened. So they're typically treated as metaphor. What is it pointing to? What's the underlying emotion?
Okay.
What do you want to have
And
happen?
we also know that just at a neurological level, anything that we are remembering, the sole purpose of it is purely for survival. It's not to be an encyclopedia of everything that's ever happened in your life. It's just to survive whatever. So what we're going to focus on in those memories are the things that we need to recall in order to stay alive. So it gives it a whole different lens, right?
Yeah.
You can have this big, beautiful, vibrant, colorful memory, but you're only going to notice these few little threatening things because that's the way that our brains are wired.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
when memories come up, very often, and it's not all the time, but very often it's a memory connected to whatever the issue is the person's working through, and the medicine helps to create completion.
Okay.
So what
Mhm.
makes a memory difficult or problematic is a lack of completion. Our system wants completion. Doesn't mean like a happy ending,
Yeah.
but it wants
Yeah.
completion. So
Some sort of
the
resolution.
medicine will allow that when that
Closure.
happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Thanks. And
Sure.
then cacao, how is that consumed exactly?
I'm actually consuming it right now.
So is it just like what you get at the grocery store and you make tea out of it? Or-
So there are different types of cacao. So I work with ceremonial grade cacao, which means that it's gone through very limited refining. There hasn't been much added to it. And it comes in usually one of two forms. It either comes as a thick block and you literally have to shave it
Mhm.
to make the cacao, or I get cacao from a company where it's already pre-shaved. So I just scoop it into my blender bottle, shake it up, and we're good to go. It's typically at least 70% or higher. If you get below 70%, it's questionable whether or not it's genuine cacao at that point.
Mhm.
It's usually consumed in a very thick manner. So like 3 tablespoons to 2 ounces of water is the traditional measurement for it. And then when I'm consuming it, I'll do a little ritual around it, a little intention setting, because cacao, when it's taken this way, is psychoactive. It's just very, 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 very mild. It's really great for heart opening in a gentle way. It's very good for focus. It contains phenylalanine, which is a dopamine precursor. It also helps with the release of serotonin. And it is, if I recall, chemically in the same class as MDMA. Phenethylamine, I always mispronounce it. It's just not that dramatic. You have to kind of tune in and kind of, if I want to work with it for its very overt psychoactive benefits, I consume it very mindfully and I take some time to meditate and feel what it's doing. It dilates the blood vessels. It impacts the thalamus gland. So physiologically, it's heart opening. People who have heart arrhythmias or untreated high blood pressure need to be mindful that it can make those things worse. So proceed with caution, start with a lower dose and just see what happens. The very first cacao
I didn't know
ceremony-
that about the blood pressure. I actually have really, really low blood pressure, like too low. So this could really be beneficial for me, it sounds like.
Yeah, in the long term, like there are studies around cacao and hypertension. If people take large enough doses over time, it actually lowers blood pressure, but it's like a significant dose twice a day. It's well exceeds my capacity. But in the short term, it does elevate it. It is a stimulant.
I'd love to get your wherever you source the cacao from. I
Yeah.
can't ask for all the other things because,
Yeah,
legality. But that I can ask for, right?
Yeah, I can pull it up right now and I'll put it in the chat group.
Perfect. Yeah. that
How
would be
long
great.
does it, how long does it stay with you?
For me, probably about 3 hours.
Hmm.
And it's, you can work on it. You can see clients, you can do yoga. It's not that altering. It's just pleasant. It's a lot smoother and more gentle than something like coffee.
Which
I
I've
wouldn't-
switched to mushroom coffee actually, but not necessarily. It's very mildly psychoactive, like lion's mane and stuff. It's not
Oh, I like
psilocybin.
lion's mane.
Yeah.
All right, let me just I will put the link in the chat group right now.
Thank you.
And
And thank you so much for this, Jess. It's been quite a pleasure and an honor to have you again.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so passionate about all of this stuff. It has been such a tremendous force for good in my life, and so deeply and profoundly transformative that it's really difficult to quantify. Except for, I don't know, I stopped drinking and dropped 70 pounds. I mean, you can quantify that.
That's significant. Yes, that's fantastic. That's beautiful.
And it's really an honor to be in service to the medicine and be in service to the community. For the people that this path is right for, and it isn't right for everybody, but for those who it's right for, the rewards far outweigh any mild discomfort that can happen. And the more you engage in the path, the more that stuff decreases. I like to think of like the first few psychedelic journeys as being a bit of emotional triage. And then once you start to loosen that stuff up, then you get to explore the deeper, more profound stuff. The mysteries.
If people are willing to stick it out after the triage. Yeah.
And not everybody goes through that. Like there are
Right.
plenty of people who just have amazing experiences every single time. It just depends on the individual, the setting, any specific traumas that they bring with them. There's plenty of
I
people
have a client who recently just did that, but he did it all on his own. And he didn't tell me about it until after the fact. And I was like, why didn't you call me while this was happening? I could have helped you through it. But yeah, somebody gave him some and he was like, well, sure, I'll take. And he was in the middle of nowhere in a cabin in the woods, which sounds like an idyllic setting, except that if you do start to have a very challenging time and there's nobody there, so
yeah, I would personally not recommend anybody doing a solo journey the first several times.
I know.
I do, like, don't do
I couldn't believe he did that. I was just like, what? Anyway, fortunately though, he was still able to have a really lovely hypnotherapy session just a couple weeks after that, and we were able to untie some of the tangled bits that he still had left over from that, so that he could, look at the experience with a different perception.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of say one more thing on that, because it is a mixed bag. Like the higher the dose, the more frequently difficult moments can happen in a journey. Like if somebody takes 5 grams, they're more likely to have difficult moments than somebody who takes 1 gram. So there is that, but no matter what, anything that comes up in a journey, it's coming from you. It's not coming from the drug. It's not coming from the outside world. It's you. So if you can learn to become still and comfortable with whatever that is that's in you, even if it's uncomfortable at the time, the medicine is simply showing you, hey, put your attention here. This is what needs to be healed.
Yeah.
This is what you need to look at.
Absolutely. And I think when it's a person's first time, having a facilitator like yourself that can be there to help sort of redirect back to that way of thinking instead of just going down the rabbit hole of, battling it, fighting it, all that stuff.
Yeah. And,
is key. So I'm so glad you're doing this in the world.
Thank you. And I've been there. Like I've battled it. I've fought with it. I've had bad trips, but they were only bad because I hadn't integrated them. As soon as I understood
Mhm.
them, then they're really, really powerful.
Right.
So yeah, if this is a path you are interested in or want to at least just talk about it more, I'm always available to talk about this stuff. Doesn't mean you have to sign up with us or anything, but if you just want to explore more and have some questions, it's a beautiful path. And
I
I'm
will
passionate
be
about it.
reaching out. I don't know that it's something that I
Yeah.
want to be like offering or anything, but I do want to learn more about it. I'm feeling compelled
Sure.
to just learn more about it for whatever reason. My higher self is saying, go learn this, Krista. So I will be reaching out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to
Thank you.
it. Thank
right.
you so much. Thank you everyone for letting me talk about this for the last hour or so. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much. And have a wonderful rest of your week and your month. And I will see you in a couple of weeks, everybody else, for our next Spotlight guest host.
Thanks. Oh, if anybody
right.
has
Oh.
any questions, you can email us at team@sacredmedicinejourneys.com.
Do you want to just pop that into
Yep.
the Facebook group underneath this video? That way everybody can find you. Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
thanks
I'll
so
post
much.
it there. Thanks.
All right.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.